Welcome to Club Damingo, brought to you by Cyclone Comics.
So I'll start things off. 5, 4, 3, 2. Are you frozen? There we go. Welcome to another episode of Club Damingo, everyone. Another one. Here we go. You got your cup of tea there, Tim? Yes. Hi, how's it going?
It this week. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I keep on, when I edit these shows each week and I have a good hard look at myself, I notice that my Parkinson's shakes intervene with the viewing of the show. So I'd just like to put it out front, which I haven't mentioned yet, that I've got Parkinson's, and if you see my jaw shake or my hands shake or my hands being restricted in motion and stuff like that, that's all the parkies. I'm not being stupid about it. It's just a natural progression of things. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, because I don't think in all of this, if you're a new viewer or someone who doesn't know us from a bar of soap, they might be asking, what's wrong with him?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, you just have to forgive
now we
my
know.
shakes.
Now we know what's wrong with you. Is that really the only thing that's wrong with you, Gary?
No, it's the only thing that anyone can actually see, I think. But anyway, I thought it's worth mentioning, seeing as how this is our 5th show.
I feel like I don't even think about it as a show, Gary. It's not a show.
It's a phone call. It's a visual phone call. I turn up
and you say, we're talking about something today. And I go, cool, let's do that.
Yeah, okay. So what are we talking about today?
I told you. Started off. What are we talking about today? Anything you like. Did you want to bring up that difficult subject that we were debating whether or not we should just think about clearly for a week, or
let's stay chatty. Let's stay chatty. Okay,
that's what
just this morning, like about half an hour ago, before I even read the post on Facebook, I was going to mention to you in a text message that maybe some of the things that we can talk about today are the different kinds of comics out there, and how the old school superhero comic has kind of bumped a lot of these other kinds of comics to the forefront of when someone says the comic industry, they really mean the American superhero comic industry, and all these other definitions of what a comic can be have been shunted to the side, left or right, and superheroes have been the big bull, the big bull in the middle of the paddock.
Yeah.
And so I was going to suggest that, but then there was a post on Facebook that Max Ferrata, the writer of Stellar Lands, posted just before I got in touch with you, talking about an article that Elizabeth McFarlane wrote online about comics being a literary or a reading gateway to real literature. And I think his point was that as far as he's concerned, he's writing Stellar Lands to be real literature, to have a certain amount of maturity and intelligence around it, and for it to be received that way as well. And it's currently getting a lot of interesting feedback from people like Danny Nolan and Christopher Sequeira and Nat Carmichael, and a few people who have some and Ali Faye as well, about responding to that, either agreeing or disagreeing. And so I was going to suggest to you that we have a chat about that, but it's as we agreed, or what I said, and I think you agreed with me, that it's a big concept that needs a little bit of thought put to it. So,
well, let's chat about it to some extent anyway. So first off, I don't know the article. I haven't read the article. Have you read the Elizabeth McFarlane article?
No, I haven't. No. I have asked for a link.
Do you know if it's a recent article? Is that like... Max just found it? Yeah, all right. Yeah. I'll have a search for that.
I've done a search for it as well, and the closest thing I've come to it is Elizabeth McFarlane posts often on a Kill Your Darlings website. So it's killyourdarlings.com. And I think that's offers writing advice and courses, and how that has a great saying in writing of, if you're writing a novel, be prepared to kill your darlings. Be severe and savage about what you cut from your work, etc., etc. So that's as far as it's gone. Of course, that Facebook post bumped right into me ringing you or texting you to say, come on, let's get online and do this conversation. So there was a time element involved.
So I reckon, without reading the article, like I can't really comment on the article, because I'm I would be really surprised if Elizabeth is denigrating comics as an art form itself, right? And she may be commenting instead on the fact that regardless of how great an art form it is, a storytelling art form, that it's still only looked at as a gateway to proper art forms by a lot of people, right? So let's accept that that's possibly what the article is about. And I might start by saying that in my part-time work as a tertiary lecturer, I lecture at JMC Academy in Sydney. One of the things, well, I do a lot of storytelling just generally because I teach animation and gaming students lots of different things from very basic how to draw through to storyboarding and cinematography or the language of cinema, visual language of cinema and that kind of thing. So, but it's all story based, right? Everything is about trying to tell the story and emotionally engage with an audience. So I push that agenda a lot with all of these students constantly and hope that by the time they get to their major project at the end of their second year or halfway through their second year, that they understand that they have to put everything through the lens of telling the story and engaging the audience. So it's a very broad range of things that I teach in different semesters depending on what the intake is. But one of the things for the first trimester students that we've talked about in visual storytelling, we bring up comics because because I think the course structure, because I don't write the course, I get given what needs to be presented every week, and then I present it in my own way. But when we start talking about visual storytelling for animation and film, the gateway that they use is comics. They talk about comics, and then they go, and here is storyboarding. Can you see the similarities and the differences? And we push very hard about the differences as well as the similarities, because I've always really hated that off the cuff comment that comics are just like storyboards, but on paper, and you read them, and they're not. They're completely different. It's a very different set of tools and methods to get the story across. But that's not even the point I'm trying to get to. The point I'm trying to get to is a bunch of the slides they give me, which I don't even show anymore, talks about the different genres that are out there, right? The different genres in comics that you can see, and it starts with they're not just superheroes. Like that's the first slide. They go, here's a superhero comic. Comics aren't just superheroes. And when I was lecturing at the Uni of Western Sydney about 20 years ago, that was a major part of what I had to teach. I had to drag the students out of the illustration students out of thinking about superheroes and then thinking about something else that we could do, right? And here we are 20 years later, and it's still part of the course structure for what I'm teaching. But I have found, and I reckon it's in the last 5 years, that when I bring up those slides and I start to say to the students, and they're not just superheroes, like, look at this is a drama, and this is Mouse, and this is, blah, 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 that their eyes glaze over, not because they're bored with it, but because they go, I know this. I don't even read superhero comics.
Interesting.
So if I ask who reads comics, maybe half the hands go up. And when I say, how many of you regularly read like a Marvel or DC superhero comic, not many hands go up. They're reading manga, and they're reading webtoons, and they're reading, stuff that is maybe still, I was going to say mainstream, because when we talk about the comics industry, mainstream equals superheroes. But when I talk to these kids, when I say mainstream, I mean like stuff that is a drama or a romance so I think as kids who are at school now are growing through and coming to tertiary and coming face to face with me, they already know that they don't have to read superheroes if they don't want to. And my experience, and I'm talking to the people at home, they probably already know this, but my experience is that the influx of manga, which started, I guess, in the 80s, right, with Viz in America, and then pushing anime um, beyond just looking at Astro Boy or Marine Boy on television. Those two things coming at the same time, I think that was the big breakthrough, because it made people read what's basically still the comic form, but with completely different stories and genres. And then it started to bring in far more of the females to read as well. And I think both of those things are the things that have allowed us to have uh, a much wider spread of genre in the medium, and 18 to 30-year-olds who go, yeah, I know that I don't have to read superheroes. There's heaps of other stuff out there. Go to Kinokuniya in Sydney,
Yeah,
and it's like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well, yes, yeah, old man. What are you talking about?
that's right. So I don't show those slides anymore.
Yeah. Um, Because when you said there are different kinds of comics, I made before we opened up the Zoom window, I made a quick list of, and your definition of mainstream is different to my definition of mainstream, which I thought was curious. And having heard your definition of romance drama, I kind of agree with that as well. I'd be hopeless on a debating team. I'd be swapping sides left, right, and centre. But this is why, like, I'll paraphrase everything that I say, which a lot of this stuff hasn't been thought through. I'm just pulling a thread
Yeah.
and following it. So as I said to you before we press play, my whole career has just been one of doing what I need to do and telling stories the way I want to tell stories. So there has been no real plan of wanting to be the next big Spider-Man artist or necessarily working for Marvel or DC or anything like that. And I started with the other guys, Cyclone Comics, just to do my own thing the way I wanted it done, because there was nothing else. There was no other way to do it back in the day. But, like I've got a list of stuff here. There's about 10. There's zines, there's small press, and this Venn diagram obviously overlaps. All these different terminologies overlap.
Yeah.
It's zines, small press, kids comics, mainstream superhero comics, which I also put / corporate comics, indie independent comics as a single entry, underground comics, outsider comics, literary comics, art comics. But these are all labels that there's only one or two there that the creator would actually place on the work themselves. Like someone working on an Australian superhero comic, that's what it is. It's a superhero comic. But being an art comic or a literary comic, they're labels that are placed on works by other people, I would suggest. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask you, what's a literary comic? What do you mean by that? What have you got examples of that?
I was going to ask you if I was to say a literary comic, what would you say is a literary comic?
Yeah, and I would expect that sometimes it's the publisher or the marketing of the publisher who wants to put that label on there, and I would say sometimes it's the publisher, as in who is publishing it, is going to be the way that the reader says to themselves, well, that's probably a literary comic, right? If it's coming from Drawn and Quarterly, or if it's coming from, I don't know. I was going to say Fantagraphics, but they publish all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But if it comes from a book publisher who is now publishing graphic novels as well, you kind of expect that maybe they're looking for something that under their own descriptive terms falls under something that's a little bit more literary, I suppose.
Right.
And what does literary mean? Does it mean that you buy something that's that thick and it's done in one, and it's not a volume that you've got to buy the next 20 volumes, like an ongoing thing? Or does literary mean that the depth of thematic, the depth of theme, and does literary mean a poetic feel and a use of the comic book form, panels or not panels, but sequential pictures, pushing that in a certain manner that is looks less like an American superhero comic and looks more like an illustrative style. See, and there's that as well, illustrative versus cartooning, and it's like
Well,
that's like
yeah, yeah.
illustrative and literary versus cartooning, and superheroes. Like it, a really gray area.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
just in prose alone, it's like there's literary prose, and then there's stuff that is uh, pulp and hack,
And there's stuff written by
and
pros and stuff written by amateurs.
that's right. Exactly.
Terminology. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Journalist
exactly.
comics,
Yeah.
journalism comics is another branch as well.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Joe Sacco material and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
and just well, with literary comics, an example with a question mark I put next to it is P. Craig Russell's adaptations of the Rings of the Nibelung opera, or that classic opera. That
Yeah. Right.
his style and the subject matter could very well put it in the racks of a literary comic, but also is in an American comic size, presented in an American comics way for that market. So
And
again,
there's a
those Venn
big cheat.
diagrams cross over all the time.
There's a big cheat there, Gary. There's a big cheat because he's adapting something that's already considered to be quite, you know, uh, artistically, accepted and in the
Yeah,
operatic,
yeah, yeah,
the ring cycle.
yeah,
It's already firmly ensconced in that art scene. So there's a big cheat there that he's going, that is well respected. I'm going to turn it into a comic and see if it'll still be respected at all.
yeah,
Right. And yes, he's definitely of the skill level to attempt that. But something that's original, right? That comes at us that then goes and sits in a place where people go very literary. Like, is that Mouse? Is that From Hell? Um, I don't read enough. Like, I don't have time to read widely enough to even know of some of the more recent ones. But uh, there's, or is it more like mainstream film, which is just there to to make some money in the cinema and then disappear, not really going to be thought about as a great work of art? Is that what most graphic novels are at the moment, especially when they're being aimed at young adults? Or like, is that my prejudice showing that if it's for young adults, they're probably not going to be deep enough thematically, probably emotionally engaging, right? Because the young adult audience really wants to engage emotionally in whatever storytelling that they partake in. But
so
yeah,
that allows for a literary early teen comic book.
like
That would be
it's
that.
like
Well,
I
no, I'm just
wouldn't.
saying as a concept. Does
Yeah,
literary also mean adult necessarily, or just
true.
well
Gotcha.
done?
Yeah. Trying to think back, like when I was in year 10 at school. So what was that age, like 15, 16? What books were they giving us to read that were aimed at our age, but were worth the investigation of reading and looking at structure and metaphor and theme and all that kind of stuff.
So
And
let's use a book like Lord of the Rings, because that's a big one that a lot of teenagers get access to at the right age and is affected quite strongly by. So that would you put that in a literary work, or is it just fantasy and a very good
just
example of
fancy.
fantasy? But
Yeah,
is
I
it
don't
also
know.
literary?
I've not read it, and it's been, I only watched the films when they first came out. So it's been a while since I don't think I've ever really thought too much about the themes. I know a lot of people have probably written about the themes, but isn't there, or am I getting a little bit mixed up with the Narnia saga as well? But are there like religious themes in there, or is it mostly like the pre-war um, political themes?
Yeah, you
But
can read
is it
into
literary?
a
So,
little bit of religious things with the return of Gandalf and stuff like that. I mean, that was introduced in the movies as well. But I think we're drifting away from comics. Maybe Lord of
I
the
was
Rings
about
was.
to say,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
my next thought was I know I've mentioned it to you a few times, Severance, which is currently in this household our favorite television show ever, and um, not to give too much away, but I was pretty disappointed disappointed. Like I loved the second season, but in comparison to the first season, I was very disappointed. Which is it goes to show how strong the that show is, how strong that story is, that I was disappointed, as well as still saying it's one of the best things I've ever seen. But the first season, the themes in there and the metaphors, etc., I thought were really incredible. And that's what, and I say to myself, is that like literary television? Is it being created from scratch for television, but to make you really think? Um, you know,
But is that the definition
why
of
is it only
literary
books?
that makes you think? Is that what we're
Well,
home?
that's right.
Yeah.
And that's why I said before, is it about pushing the medium, right? So if a literary comic is about pushing the medium and seeing what can happen with it that people don't usually do. Is that the literary aspect? Or is it the fact that when you put it down, you can't stop thinking about it and thinking about the themes and how it applies to your life? Or
is it a nice turn of phrase? Like the being able to
use.
Is
it just poetic?
Is it poetic? Yeah. And is it something that a creator should and does have no control of, that it's other people will categorize it as they see fit and put it on the shelf next to wherever they best catalog their works on their bookshelves at home? So maybe it's if you approach a concept with the intent of it being an art comic or a journal, some things are more easier to define. You can do set out to do a journalistic comic and achieve that, but to go out there and trying to achieve an art comic or a literary comic, that's harder things to try and score points on.
Yeah. Did you ever read Asterius Polyp?
No, I've seen a few pages of it though. As a experimental art piece. I'd put that into the art comics category.
Yeah, it's really worth your while tracking down and reading.
It's really expensive. They haven't reprinted it much.
Really? Oh, right. It's so just in
that's David Mazzucchelli, isn't it?
Yeah, just trying to subconsciously think of what would be a literary comic from whole cloth, something that isn't really kind of thinking too much about genre and leaning on genre, and not trying to pull something like an adaptation of Great Expectations or something.
Yeah.
So I feel like this discussion we're having, David Mazzucchelli, is that how you pronounce it?
That's how I pronounce it.
Okay, Mazzucchelli was trying to tick a lot of the boxes that I kind of just ran through, which is pushing the medium and doing stuff with it that hadn't really been done too much before, and looking at every aspect of it, color and line and page layout and using the lettering in a certain manner, and presenting them as a language that works only in this book, right? If you wanted to put it into if you wanted to not rip off, but borrow some of some of the experimentation that he does in there. If you wanted to borrow that and put it in your own comic, you'd have to introduce it as a language and get the audience used to the language before you started to go too much further with it, which is what he does. And then once he's introduced that, then he starts to play with it and mix bits and pieces together. Again, it's probably been a good 10 or more years since I've read it, but that's my memory of it. Plus, it's a exploration from memory. It's an exploration of what it means to be an artist, and the two main characters are both artistic, and how they're approaching it. I think that's what it is, and they're like romantically linked as well. So they're the kind of things that I honestly think, if you're looking for putting together a literary comic, I think you really in the way that I would look at it, if you're going literary, you're probably tending a little bit towards the artistic side of things rather than just the entertainment side of things. And it doesn't mean they're mutually exclusive, but I think if you're writing a sci-fi story that does have interesting themes, like sci-fi and horror often talk about themselves as being important because they make you think about, like horror makes you think about your greatest fears and what it is to be human and to fear things and how you work through that. And sci-fi often opens up ethical questions that we can't otherwise really visualize or talk through in a book or whatever, unless you are in this fantastical world. So they have literary concerns in that way, but they're often more backseat to explosions and laser beams or jump scares or whatever. But then you have very literary horror and quite very literary sci-fi as well, where they push into that, and then they become a little bit more artistically inclined. So I reckon there's a spectrum, and I don't think it's a spectrum on a line. It's probably like a circular spectrum, and things move around depending on art and theme and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The other term that was used in this Facebook thread by Max and a few of the commenters was the term gatekeeper, how things are defined. Yeah, it's a troublesome term because, like, is a publisher trying to sell their literary comics line a gatekeeper of that form? Is Marvel a gatekeeper and DC a gatekeeper of superhero comics? What is the definition of a gatekeeper, and what purpose does it serve, if any, and how easily is it a role or a position that can be defrayed because it's only a construct that you can go around a gatekeeper quite easily because you're just listening to what they have to say, but you can also ignore that and just get past it and get on with what you want to
do. Yeah. I have some respect for certain gatekeepers, and I think there is a place for gatekeeping in everything, in that, especially nowadays, because gatekeeping is really just the gate, and we can all just walk around the gate anytime we like nowadays because of the internet, right? It's not like the old days where there were three bookshops in town, and you could only buy what they liked and what they imported. We can buy anything we want from anywhere now, but there's so much stuff, again, because there's no gatekeeping. You can make your own comics, you can make your own film, you can make your own books, etc., that you have to turn to somebody and say, what is good in your opinion, because I trust your opinion, right? So, and a lot of that is just talking to our friends and saying, what have you read lately, and what do you think is a good thing to read? But there's also, I think, a good thing in having online gatekeepers where you go, what are they reviewing that they think is good? And I might go track that down. Same with, the podcasts you watch. You want to hear what it is that they think is a good film to watch or a comic to buy or whatever. So I'm not wholly against gatekeeping.
Because that also plays into, while you're at that point of what we were trying to achieve with the ledgers and the judging process there, that a lot of people who didn't agree with that process might have felt that the judging process was gatekeeperish as well.
Aren't all awards about locking things behind a gate and saying this is the good stuff? And that's what an award is for.
I don't know about locking things behind a gate.
Well, not locking them, but or I don't know, putting them on a pedestal for you to look at, and saying these are the good things, but the rest of the stuff, we can't put everything up on that pedestal. For listeners who don't know, Gary and I ran the Ledger Awards, which were the what is now called the Comic Arts Awards of Australia. So the awards for comics. I think we did an extraordinarily amazing job of not being a gatekeeper about that, and making sure that it doesn't matter what form your comics take, they are eligible and highly possible of receiving any of the three levels of award: bronze, silver, gold. So whether it's a mini comic that you run off on your printer of 20 copies, or something that is in situ, glass panels in a building somewhere, or whether it's New York best-selling superhero stuff, everything was able to be everything was on the plate, ready to win an award, and everything in those kind of levels won or was shortlisted. And what we were looking for was exemplary work. Like, what this is the thing. I still think that judges of that and our peers, our practicing peers, also don't get, and just generally people don't get, is that we want to take what is sitting in the gold, silver, and bronze section there and pick it up and say, this is an example, i.e., it's exemplary of comics done extraordinarily well. That's what I was always after. I think you and I differed a little bit in that you thought best to get the longest shortlist we could, and I kept on saying I think it should be as focused as possible. I really want to be able to pick up all of the comics on the shortlist and go, this is an example of a really amazingly well done comic. And I'm sure that you and I and other practitioners, when you know that, and you look at your own comic, and you go, is this an example of something that is extraordinarily well done? You might have a better idea of whether or not it's going to get shortlisted and then award winning.
The point that I was always battling and trying to make clear was that the works weren't competing with each other.
Exactly.
And that was so hard, because the default nature of an awards is being competitive. And for the ledgers, or the cars as they are now, I've always thought and tried to push the concept of it's no competition. If anything, you're competing against yourself and your project or your creativity to make it as good as it possibly can be, to get the judges' attention of, wow, this is shit hot and it needs more attention. And that's what the award is for. But even now, even with you and I out of the yearly organisation, I still get emails and comments from people saying that they thought the perception was that it was a competition, and how one, and it was just wrong, because that's not the way we approached the whole thing at all. Comics is comics is comics, as you kept on saying, and it's true. Like a mini comic was not in competition against a 400-page graphic novel. That would be, not correct, not unfair to either of them, but it wouldn't correlate. So it had to be judged on its own merits. If there was a stick figure mini comic A5 12-page hand stapled thing, did it set out to do what the creator, as far as the judge is concerned, was trying to achieve, and how well did they do that? And that was always the hardest thing for me to get across to people was, it was very frustrating.
Yeah. Anyway, we set up a structure and let it go into the universe, and we'll see how it continues its life.
The other observation I'd like to make, just while we're talking about comics in general, particularly in Australia, is that I noticed when I was at Paper Cuts a couple of years ago, that at the market day on the Sunday, that I felt, now I sold a lot of comics, and I was tabled next to Dylan Naylor, and he was selling lots of stuff too. And down across the aisle was Reverie Comics, and there was Tad down there, and Dave DeVries was down there. But that was the closest representation of like the superhero mainstream market that was in that hall. The rest of it, I felt like not an outsider, because I had a great time, but it was like certainly not the mainstream of that market hall. And I thought, and I took a lot away from that there was a lot of interesting stuff being done that wasn't competition to me at all. It was just people doing their creative outlets and selling it and having conversations with people. And I think it was less about the money and more about the community. But that hall, that market hall, was packed. It was actually absolutely packed, and I felt like I was in a minority in a good way.
It's is that because it's Australia and we don't have the Comic Cons that America has? Is it because it was an arts festival? Paper Cuts is presented as an arts festival. I
don't know what it was, but there was an opportunity there for a representation of creative people to have a table and to sell their stuff, and the representation was right across a very wide variety of subject matters and content. And I'd imagine,
but we haven't made superhero comics in this country to a great degree since the 70s onwards, really, have we? Like Cyclone and So yes, like the stable of comics that came out of Cyclone is probably the strongest example of superheroes in the last, well, would it be 30 or 40 years in Australia? Very few people after that have really, and I'm probably going to get into trouble for saying that, but have really tried to do superheroes terribly much. Are there many? Like,
Well,
I
there's
must be wrong.
Reverie, there's Torn, published by Reverie. There's Dark
Yeah,
Nebula still going with Reverie as well. There's a Southern Squadron still going as well. But
yeah,
when you
but they're
start,
still going. Yeah.
yeah, but when you start talking about fresh ideas of superheroes, there's always an Australian take on it. Like there's that the Ned Kelly Kickstarter that's happening at the moment with the Bush Rangers, with a superheroic, I assume, kind of power story dynamic happening with it. So
I don't know that's like I wouldn't put that into the same superhero category as capes and tights. It's starts to get adjacent, I think.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think again of when my peers and I were making comics, and it was Greener Pastures and Platinum Grit and Bug and Stump and Hair But the Hippo and
superhero, superhero. No,
none of them were superheroes. There was Anthology, and that had it was action and adventure oriented because of its influence from Image Comics. But even that did it have, what did they have in there superhero wise? It was Pizza Man, but that was satire.
Well, one would suggest that Southern Squadron was a whole heavy dollop of satire in there as well.
Oh yeah, but that's how you do Australian superheroes, isn't it? You take it with a with a heavy dose of larrikinism, right?
Yeah, true.
Isn't that like going all the way back to the 40s? Isn't that how superheroes were done in this country with a pretty larrikin sort of nature?
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. And I suppose that circles back to Max's Stellar Lands, which the first issue is what I've read, and that features a superpowered female in it as well, but it also is draped with science fiction visuals as well. So there's, again, that Venn diagram gets overlaid.
Yeah. So is that more sci-fi than superhero, do you think? It's action adventure, but is it sci-fi action adventure?
Yeah, from what I've read, it's attempting to be a few things. And it's planned to be a 9-issue series. So the real big test is reading the whole thing when it's finished to see how it gels. But the first issue certainly was dressed up as a superhero comic, but set in the future.
Okay, I haven't read it, so I'm not sure. But my memory of that protagonist, she has a cape. Is that right? I'm picturing her like floating in the air. Anyway,
I think so.
I'll have to have a read.
Yeah, that's quite good, and I was looking forward to seeing where it goes. I think the second issue is out, and more coming soon. Blah blah blah.
Great, cool. Yeah.
So the big test for that, and anything that starts to be an Australian comic with a limited series number on it, is getting to that final issue and seeing the idea completed from someone who has lots of ideas left dangling. The proof is in the sticking the landing. Yeah.
That was, you asked me earlier, what should we talk about today? Sticking the landing was one of the things I thought might be an interesting subject for another week. Endings and how hard they are to do, how hard they are to get there in our lives, but also how hard they are to create as, satisfying artistic experience as well.
Which is why that advice to young players is always quite valid. Of start small, do a couple of self-contained short stories. You may have that big epic in the back of your head, but it might be an anvil around your life that like if you start it, you got to try and finish it, and you may not be able to.
Tell me about it.
Yes. Tell me about it. Yeah, we're both reapproaching our characters after many years away from them, and we're putting the finishing touches on them finally. And so many decisions are made in your early 20s, and you're so immature when you're in your early 20s, and you start the ball rolling thinking that you can do this and do that, and then life gets in the way. And that's why starting small is always a good advice, but you can't put An old shoulder on young heads. No, and you can't cut off a young person's head because you'll get thrown into jail.
And we've tried many times.
Yeah. They can't. They'll never find the bodies. They'll never find the bodies.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. I reckon we've hacked into this quite well from our position of ignorance. So
yeah, I think we've done well considering we didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I knew we would. I knew we would. It's a can of worms. So
it is
to have those slippery worms.
And as you said before we press record, if we have more thoughts during the week and this thread online develops into something, we'll follow up next week. The following up point of this show is that I saw some photos of a couple in America sitting in a park holding up Batman Hush 2, the oversized editions.
Ah, cool.
And it looked like it's quite sturdy. The cover is cardboard and it looks quite lovely. Even the ad on the back is, quite blown up to A3 size. It's just, as Samuel said, it's just the printed edition, but done at original art size, 11 by 17. So
there it is on your desk there behind you. Where am I pointing? Up there somewhere on your desk. There it is. And and I sent you a link to a little story that Barry Windsor Smith was telling on Facebook about his Storyteller series, which was oversized as well. And I thought to myself, I think what wasn't Love and Rockets was all magazine sized, a little bit oversized as well. Lots of great examples of English language and American produced comics that oversized. I think you're on a winner. I reckon you should go for it.
The thing that I'm curious about, because I don't have a comic shop close to me, is how the comics retailers are handling these 11 by 17 Batman issues in particular. The artist editions is one thing because you can go down to your shelving that has space and hardcover coffee editions, coffee table books and things like that. But these blown up floppy comics that have a cardboard cover, I wonder how the comic shops are dealing with them and showcasing them in the store, or whether they're not bothering. It's just special orders and they'll keep them under the counter and you come collect your special order and away you go.
I might, I'm in town tomorrow. I might go via King's and see where they've situated it and how they're operating it. If I go to King's, I'll also have a look to see what they're doing with Australian comics. Not to denigrate King's, but because they're great friends of ours.
Yep, great supporters of the industry.
But last time I went, there wasn't a lot of Australian comics on the shelves, and they have to rationalise whether or not things are going to sell or not. I always kind of check that out.
And then there's the ongoing kerfuffle with international tariffs with the United States.
God, yeah.
And Canadian printing, Chinese printing. I've read online that there are things like action figure campaigns that have been just pulled all of a sudden because they're all being ordered.
Unbelievable.
And gaming contracts have been pulled as well, and people are just running scared because they're so volatile, and no one knows, particularly with Kickstarters, how to charge appropriately and absorb the costs of any tariff changes. Best to pull the whole thing and just wait and see. So that's a developing story as well, I suppose. Yeah.
Well,
all we can do is draw more comics.
Yeah, draw more.
And then worry about how to get them out there later.
It's always the answer. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to stop recording, Mr. Wanted T-shirt, and
draw more.
Yeah, and we'll talk next week.
Cool, man.